morning. I hope you're having an adventurous weekend. Our story today is written by a UU minister named Reverend Christina Leone-Tracy, and it's called The Broken Story. Once upon a time, there was a man with a story. This wasn't any old once upon a time story, not one that you could find on a bookshelf or hear around the campfire. This was his story and no one else's. This story had been carefully crafted. It began before he was born, and this story told of his loves and fears, his dreams realized and his dreams yet to come. This story was complete. It told his whole life, including those bits that still existed in his imagination. In fact, this story was so complete and he was so happy with his story that he carried it around to make sure it was safe. It was somewhat bulky and unwieldy, but he didn't mind. It was his story. One thing about his story was it was very fragile. Made up of many pieces and held together by only his own imagination, he was worried it might break apart at any minute. And so he grew more and more protective of his story, and he held it even closer. As he went about his life, he checked on the story to make sure he was following it correctly. He avoided adventure and unknowns because, well, they might break his story. Then, one day, the inevitable happened. Without warning, his story broke. It was unforeseen, and he hadn't done anything wrong at all. But there it was, laying in 1,000 shattered pieces on the ground, with the sunlight glinting off the bits of story he had so carefully protected for all those years. He was heartbroken. And since his story hadn't said to put the pieces back together, he was at a loss. What now? He sat down next to the pile of pieces and he cried. He didn't know what to do. A while later, maybe it was minutes, maybe it was hours, a group of people came out of the nearby building and saw him sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by a pile of broken pieces, clearly in need of help. "What happened here?" a woman asked. "My story, it's gone. I worked so hard to build it, to protect it, to keep it from harm, and now it's gone. Gone," he wailed. "Is this the story here?" a man asked. "Yes, look at it. There's nothing left of it." "It looks like it's here, not gone," said a child. "We just have to put it back together." "Put it back together? There's no way. You don't even know what it looked like. How will you put it back together if you don't even know me?" The child was tenacious. "Don't worry, with all of us here to help, we'll put it back together in a way that you would never even expect. You never know, it might be more beautiful than before." So they swept up the pieces of this man's story carefully and went together into the building from which they had come out. They poured him some hot coffee and sang a song he had never heard before. Something about coming again and again, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times. The song was soothing and the coffee was warm. He began to feel hope again that his story could be put back together. And it took a long time. Maybe it was days, maybe it was years, but they got it all back together and they added new parts. And some of the old parts didn't fit anymore. But that was okay. The child had been right. It was more beautiful than before. And this time, the story was held together not only by his imagination, but the imagination and support of an entire community. And it wasn't nearly so fragile. And it even allowed for adventure. We have some pieces to put back together in our story. And South Church is a place where we can all work together to build our stories, our collective story, and our individual stories. And there are always people to help. I love you, and I hope to see you soon.